Hey, my name is Dean Miller. I'm 28 years old and I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I work as a technical documentation specialist at Whitmore Design Group, a small architecture firm downtown. My job isn't glamorous. I don't design buildings. I don't sit in meetings making big decisions. I check drawings, catch mistakes other people miss, prepare project files, and make sure everything is technically sound before it goes out the door. Most days I'm the guy nobody really notices until something goes wrong. I got used to that a long time ago. After Laura died, I got even more used to living quietly. Laura was my girlfriend for 3 years. We weren't dramatic. We weren't the kind of couple who fought in public or posted every moment online. We just fit. We talked about moving in together, about getting a dog, about what color to paint the living room. Then, one rainy night 4 years ago, a drunk driver crossed the center line on the parkway and took everything. I got the call at 2 in the morning. Since then, I've gone to work, paid my rent, smiled when I needed to, but a part of me stayed frozen in that hospital hallway. I didn't date. I didn't open up. I told myself I was fine being alone until Marina Collins walked into my life. She's 31 and works as a project coordinator at the same firm. Not my boss, but every project eventually passes through her hands if it's going to stay on track. Marina is the kind of person who always has a backup plan, a spare pen, and a quiet way of fixing problems before anyone else notices they exist. She's not flashy. She doesn't walk into a room and turn heads. But if you work with her long enough, you realize she's the one holding everything together. When I first started at Whitmore, she was the one who showed me how to read complex project specs without getting lost. Once, when I came in with a fever and tried to power through, she left a cup of hot tea on my desk without saying a word. Later, she simply said, "You don't have to prove you're okay when you're clearly not." I remembered that sentence for weeks. I think I started liking her the first month I knew her. Not in a loud, reckless way, just every time she smiled at one of my dry comments, the day felt lighter. Every time she asked if I'd eaten lunch, I felt seen instead of invisible. But Marina already had a fiancé, Brandon Whitman, finance guy. Good looking in that polished, knows he's good looking way. Expensive shirts, expensive watch, expensive smile. I never liked him. Not because I had any right to be jealous, I didn't. But because he talked about Marina like she was another item on his checklist of success. Nice job, nice car, nice house coming soon, and a nice, well-behaved wife to complete the picture. Marina loved him. Or at least she believed she did. When she started handing out wedding invitations around the office, I got one too. A cream-colored envelope placed gently on my desk one Wednesday afternoon. "Dean, if you're free, I'd love for you to come. I know it's a bit of a drive, but it would mean a lot to have some colleagues there." I almost said no. Nobody wants to watch the person they quietly care about marry someone else. But she looked at me with those honest eyes, and I couldn't refuse. So that Saturday morning, I put on my one decent gray suit, climbed into my old Ford, and drove to St. Augustine Church on the outskirts of Pittsburgh. It was a beautiful old brick building with stained glass windows and the soft smell of white lilies everywhere. I sat near the back, where people like me belong. Not family, not close friends, just someone there to witness. Marina stood at the end of the aisle in a simple white dress her mother had helped make and her grandmother had embroidered. She looked beautiful in the way that makes you understand she had poured her whole heart into this day. But the groom never showed up. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The polite murmurs started turning into uneasy whispers. By 45 minutes, the atmosphere in the church had shifted from concern to something darker, curiosity mixed with pity and a little cruelty. I sat with my hands clenched on my knees, watching Marina stand perfectly still on the altar, bouquet trembling slightly in her grip. Her mother was crying quietly in the front row. Her father's face had gone hard as stone. Then her maid of honor, Emily, rushed up with a phone. Marina took it. I couldn't hear what she read, but I saw the exact moment something inside her broke. Later I learned Brandon's message had only 3 words. "I can't, sorry." 5 years together, 14 months of planning, 200 guests, ended with 3 words. Someone in the back muttered loud enough for half the church to hear, "Guess she really got left at the altar." A few people actually laughed. Marina didn't cry out loud. She just stood there, frozen, like her body hadn't caught up with what her heart already knew. I thought about Laura, not because Marina reminded me of her, she didn't, but because I remembered the feeling of watching someone I cared about be destroyed by something I couldn't stop. That helpless rage. Except this time, the person was still standing in front of me. Still breathing, still here, and I could do something. I don't remember deciding to stand up. I just remember the sound of my chair scraping back and the sudden weight of 200 pairs of eyes turning toward me as I walked down the aisle. I didn't run. I walked slowly, one step at a time. The whispers died down. Phones lowered. Marina saw me coming, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. "Dean!" I stepped up onto the altar beside her. The minister looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Who are you?" he asked. I took a deep breath. I knew this was the craziest thing I'd ever done. But I said it clearly enough for the entire church to hear. "I'm the man who's going to marry Marina Collins today." The church erupted in shocked murmurs. Marina stared at me like I'd gone insane. "Dean, what are you doing?" I leaned in close so only she could hear. "Just trust me for 1 minute. You don't deserve to leave here humiliated. If you want me to stop, say the word and I'll walk away right now. But if you need a way out, I'm right here." She looked around, at the phone still recording, at her crying mother, at her furious father, at the people who had been laughing at her pain only moments before. Then she looked back at me. There was fear in her eyes, but there was also something else. A tiny spark of hope. "Are you sure?" she whispered. I nodded. "I'm sure." The minister tried to explain that the marriage license had Brandon's name on it and couldn't be changed on the spot. Someone from Brandon's family stood up to object. A few people called it a stunt. But then Marina's father, George Collins, rose from his seat in the front row. He looked at the empty space where Brandon should have been standing, then at me. A regular guy in a slightly too big suit who had just done something no one else in the room had the courage to do. "If my daughter agrees," he said, voice steady, "then I agree too." Marina reached for my hand. Hers was ice cold. "Yes," she told the minister, "I want to continue." The minister couldn't perform a legal wedding right then, but he could do a public commitment ceremony, a promise made in front of family and friends. The paperwork, if we wanted it, could come later. When it came time for the vows, I didn't say anything romantic or fake. I looked straight at Marina and spoke from the only place that felt honest. "I promise I will never use your pain as entertainment. I promise to respect you, to protect your dignity, and to never let you stand alone in a moment like this if I can help it." Marina's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't only from being abandoned. "I promise," she said softly. "I won't forget that you stood up when no one else did. I promise to honor that kindness, whatever happens next." When the minister finished, the church stayed silent for a few long seconds before the applause started. Scattered at first, then growing. Some people were still confused, some looked genuinely moved. A few just clapped because they didn't know what else to do. Our kiss was light. No passion, no performance, just a gentle press of lips that felt more like respect than romance. But when I took Marina's hand and we walked back down the aisle together, I felt her stop shaking quite so hard. She was still hurt, still in shock, still trying to understand how her entire life had just changed in one afternoon. But she wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in 4 years, neither was I. The reception after the ceremony felt like a play where no one remembered their lines. The sign at the entrance still read Marina and Brandon in elegant gold lettering. The cake still had their initials on top. The tables were set for 200 guests. The band kept playing the love songs that had been chosen months earlier. Everything was exactly as it was supposed to be, except the groom was gone and I was standing in his place. Marina walked into the ballroom holding my arm, her face carefully composed. I could feel every time her fingers tightened around mine when someone whispered too loudly. A distant cousin of Brandon's leaned toward his wife and said, "They must have been sneaking around for months." Another voice answered, "Or she just swapped grooms at the last second because the first one bailed." I started to turn, but Marina gave my arm the smallest shake. "Don't," she murmured. "Today has been loud enough." So I stayed quiet and did what needed to be done. I guided her between the tables. I helped lift the hem of her dress when it caught on a chair. I fetched her a glass of water when I noticed she hadn't drunk anything in over an hour. When people asked how long we'd been together, I answered calmly, "Long enough to know she didn't deserve what happened today." That usually shut them up. Her mother pulled her aside near the gift table. I couldn't hear everything, but I saw Marina's shoulders shake as she cried into her mother's arms. When they pulled apart, her mother looked across the room at me. Her expression wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile anymore either. Later, George Collins found me at the bar. Marina's father was a big man with rough hands and a quiet voice. He used to work as a mechanic before his back forced him to retire. He didn't waste time with small talk. "Do you love my daughter?" I looked at him for a long moment. Lying would have been easy, but Marina had already been lied to by one man today. I wasn't going to be the second. "I don't know if I have the right to call it love yet," I said honestly. "But I respect her." And I couldn't stand there and watch her be humiliated. George studied me for several seconds, then gave a single nod. "At least you're not a liar." When the reception finally ended, Marina had nowhere to go. The apartment she had been planning to share with Brandon was out of the question. Her parents' house was full of confused relatives. My place was small, but it was quiet and, more importantly, it was safe. "You can stay at my apartment tonight," I told her. "I'll take the couch, you take the bed. We'll figure everything out tomorrow." She looked at me, exhausted beyond the point of arguing. "Are you sure?" "My apartment isn't fancy," I said, "but it's safe." She nodded. My building was old, 3 stories, no elevator, narrow stairs that smelled like cheap floor cleaner. The light in the hallway flickered the way it had for 3 months despite my complaints to the landlord. When I unlocked the door and stepped aside, I felt a wave of embarrassment. The couch was old. The dining table was small. There was a stack of unpaid bills on the counter and a pile of project drawings I'd brought home to review. This was not the kind of place you brought a bride home to on her wedding night. But Marina looked around slowly and said, "It's warm." I didn't know why those 2 words made my chest loosen. I gave her one of my clean t-shirts and a pair of sweatpants. She disappeared into the bathroom. When she came out, the wedding dress was gone. No perfect makeup, no carefully styled hair, no image of the strong bride who had stood in front of 200 people. Just Marina, tired and small in my oversized shirt. I made chamomile tea, something Laura used to say helped when sleep wouldn't come. We sat across from each other at the tiny table. I spoke first. "Marina, I need you to understand something. I did what I did today because I thought it was the right thing. Not because you owe me anything." She stared down at her cup. "But everyone thinks we're married now." "I know. Videos are going to spread." "I know. People at work will find out." "I know that too." For the first time all day, she let out a small, tired laugh. I continued, "We have a few options. Tomorrow we can tell everyone it was just a gesture to save you from embarrassment. Or we can keep the story going for a while until things calm down. Or," I hesitated. "Or what?" she asked. "Or we can actually try to get to know each other. Not because of obligation, not because of gratitude. Just 2 adults in a strange situation who want to see if there's something real here." She was quiet for a long time. Outside the window, the streetlights glowed through the thin curtains. The city kept moving like nothing had changed while our lives had been flipped upside down. "What do you want, Dean?" she asked softly. No one had asked me that in years. After Laura, I stopped letting myself want anything too big. I just did my job, paid my bills, and kept my head down. But Marina was looking at me like my answer mattered. "I want to make sure you're okay," I said. "And I want to know you outside of work, outside of today, outside of you being the woman who just got left at the altar." Her eyes glistened. "I don't know if I can trust anyone right now." "Then don't trust me yet. Just don't make any big decisions tonight." She glanced toward the bedroom, then back at me. "You said earlier you didn't regret standing up. Was that true?" I nodded. "Why?" I was quiet for a moment. Then I told her about Laura. Not everything, just enough. How we had planned a life together. How one phone call took it all away. How after that I lived like someone who didn't want to care about anyone again because caring meant having something to lose. "When I saw you standing at that altar," I said, looking down at my tea, "I remembered what it felt like to watch someone I cared about hurting and not being able to do anything. But today I could do something, so I stood up." Marina didn't speak right away. After a while, she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Not a squeeze, not dramatic, just a light, steady touch. I'm sorry about Laura, she whispered. I nodded. Thank you. That night I slept on the couch. She took the bedroom. Before she closed the door, she turned back. Dean. Yeah? In that church there were 200 people. You were the only one who stood up. I didn't know what to say to that. In the end, I just said, get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard. I lay on the couch staring at the peeling paint on the ceiling, the same ceiling I had stared at for the past 3 years. I had just stepped into a story I never planned for. I should have felt terrified, but all I felt was one clear, quiet truth. I didn't regret standing up, not even a little. The days after the wedding turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into something neither of us had a name for. News of what happened at the church spread faster than either of us expected. Someone posted the video online. Strangers called me a hero. Others called me crazy or an opportunist. At work, the tension was worse. Our boss called us both into his office the following Monday. I thought I was about to lose my job. But Marina walked in with her back straight and her voice calm. We'll keep our personal lives outside these walls, she said. Dean doesn't want special treatment, and neither do I. I nodded. I'm still just the guy who checks drawings, that's all. In the team meeting later, Marina addressed the elephant in the room directly. I know everyone is curious, she said, standing at the front of the room like she was presenting a project. But my private life isn't a group assignment. If you have questions about work, I'm happy to answer them. The room went quiet. I looked at her and realized something I hadn't fully understood before. Marina wasn't weak. She was hurt. But she wasn't weak. She stayed at my apartment longer than either of us planned. At first, everything was careful. I slept on the couch. She took the bedroom. We worked out a bathroom schedule like roommates. I bought an extra toothbrush and a small lamp because she said complete darkness made it hard for her to sleep. Then the little things started. She began leaving notes on the fridge. There's a sandwich in the blue container. Don't skip lunch again. I started making chamomile tea for her every night without asking. No one called it taking care of each other. But we both knew what it was. We began having real conversations. One evening she told me about her mother working 2 jobs so Marina could finish college. Her grandmother taught her how to sew and always said a woman didn't need money to have dignity. I told her about my parents, my dad driving trucks across the country, my mom working the register at a grocery store. I was the first in my family to finish any kind of degree. I wasn't ambitious. I just wanted a decent life, a steady job, and someone who didn't see my ordinary life as a failure. Marina looked at me for a long time after I said that. Brandon always wanted to look like a winner, she said quietly. He talked about the future like it was a stage. Big house, nice car, perfect photos. But when it came time to actually be kind, he disappeared. I didn't say anything. I just added a little more honey to her tea. Some nights we ate cheap pizza on the couch. Some mornings she straightened my tie before we left for work, and we both got embarrassed because it felt too much like something real married couples did. One night I came home late and found her asleep at the dining table, head resting on her arms beside a stack of interior design sketches. I stood there watching her for a long time, something soft and terrifying unfolding in my chest. On the shelf by the window, the small photo of Laura still sat in its frame. Marina had seen it the first day but never asked. One quiet evening while I was washing dishes, she stood in front of the shelf and said softly, She was beautiful. My hand stilled. Yeah. Do you still love her? There was no jealousy in the question, just gentleness. I dried my hands and leaned against the counter. Part of me probably always will, but it's not the same as loving someone who's still here. It's more like a room in the house that's locked. I don't live in it anymore, but I haven't torn it down either. She nodded. I don't want to replace her. You're not like her, I said. I know, but I don't want you to feel guilty if one day you're happy again. That sentence left me speechless. After that night, something between us softened. Marina wasn't pulling me out of the past. She was just sitting with me long enough that I realized I didn't have to stay there forever. One rainy evening, the power in the building flickered. Marina sat at the table sketching something. I thought it was work, but when I walked past, I saw it was a design for a small apartment interior. That's beautiful, I said. She tried to cover it. It's just doodling. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. No, it's really good. You should do interior design. She laughed like I'd said something ridiculous. I'm just a project coordinator. I'm just a technical documentation guy. That doesn't mean I can't recognize something good when it's right in front of me. She went quiet. We both knew I wasn't only talking about the drawing. After that, Marina started sketching more seriously. I bought her a better set of pencils one Friday night. Nothing expensive, just something I thought she needed. She held the box for a long time. You don't have to do this. I know. Why do you keep saying that? I shrugged. Because the best things are usually the ones no one makes you do. She looked down and I saw her smile. 3 months after the wedding Marina took me to dinner at her parents' house. I was more nervous than she was. Their home was small and warm with a wooden porch and flower pots her mother tended herself. When we walked in, her mother hugged Marina for a long time. Her father shook my hand with his rough mechanic's grip. Dinner was quiet at first. Her mother tried to keep the conversation light, food, weather, work. But the real question sat heavy on the table. Finally, George put down his fork and looked straight at me. Dean, I want to ask you something. That day in the church? What were you really thinking when you stood up? I swallowed hard. Marina looked at me. We could have dressed the story up, made it prettier, but I didn't want to start my relationship with her family on a lie. So I told the truth. Brandon had left her with a text. People were laughing, recording. She was standing there alone and I couldn't take it. I didn't stand up because I thought I was a hero, I said. I didn't know what would happen afterward. I just knew your daughter didn't deserve to be treated that way. No one does. The table went silent. Her mother wiped her eyes. George stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I was sitting in the front row that day. I saw a lot of people looking at my girl, but you were the only one who walked forward. I didn't know what to say. He turned to Marina. You're not weak for accepting help, Marina. You're strong because you stayed standing when the whole room was waiting for you to fall. Marina started crying. Her mother reached for her hand, voice thick. I don't know where this marriage is going, but I know one thing. When I couldn't protect you that day, Dean did what a decent man should do. George looked back at me. Love doesn't always start with romance. Sometimes it starts with kindness. But if the two of you want to make this real, don't build it on gratitude. Build it on choice. Every single day, choose each other. Understand? I nodded. I understand. On the drive home, Marina was quiet for most of the ride. Then she placed her hand over mine on the gear shift. Not for show, not because anyone was watching, just because she wanted to, and I didn't pull away. When we got back to the apartment, she stopped in front of the bedroom door. Dean. Yeah? I want to try. For real. I understood what she meant. Not trying to pretend we were married, not trying to keep up appearances, trying us. I stepped closer. I want that too. She smiled, eyes shining. Then we should do it properly, date each other, even though we're already married. I laughed. Dating my own wife, that sounds strange, but kind of sweet. I didn't kiss her right away. I just asked, can I? She nodded. Our first real kiss happened in that small kitchen, under the old light, while rain tapped against the window. No church, no guests, no cameras. Just two people who had both been broken by life, finally choosing to trust something kind again. Everything was going better than I had any right to expect. 6 months after the day at the church, Marina and I had settled into something that felt almost normal. We moved into a slightly bigger apartment with an extra room that became her design corner. She started taking on small interior design projects at work on the side. I was still checking drawings, but for the first time in years I was thinking about taking classes to move into project management. Not to prove anything to anyone. Just because I wanted a clearer future for us. Then Brandon came back. He showed up at the office on a Thursday afternoon wearing an expensive coat and that same polished smile that never quite reached his eyes. I saw him before Marina did. He was talking to the receptionist like he owned the building. I need to see my fiancée. I walked over. She's not your fiancée anymore. Brandon looked me up and down. Ah, the church hero. His voice dripped with contempt. I'm not here to talk to you, but you're standing in my wife's workplace. The word wife came out so naturally it surprised even me. Brandon gave a cold laugh. You actually think this is real? She married you because she was in shock, because she was humiliated. You're just the bandage I left behind. I clenched my fists but didn't answer. I'd learned that people like Brandon wanted a reaction. I wasn't going to give him one. Marina stepped out of the hallway at that moment. She froze when she saw him. For 1 second, her face went pale, then she pulled herself together. What do you want, Brandon? He launched into his speech. He said he'd panicked on the wedding day, that everything had moved too fast, that he hadn't really wanted to leave her, that seeing her with me had made him realize he still loved her. Marina listened without interrupting. When he finally stopped, she laughed. A short, bitter sound. You realize that after I stopped standing alone at the altar waiting for you? Brandon glanced at me. He's not right for you, Marina. He's just some regular employee. You've always deserved better. I felt that old wound open up inside me, the one that had heard variations of those words my whole life. Not good enough, not rich enough, not ambitious enough. But Marina stepped closer and stood beside me. Dean is right for me because he stayed. Brandon went quiet. She continued, voice steady. You might have more money, better looks, a bigger ego. But on the worst day of my life, you disappeared. Dean stood up. That tells me everything I need to know. Brandon's face twisted. When selfish people get cornered, they don't apologize. They attack. He told the truth in the cruelest way possible. He hadn't just panicked. Before the wedding, Brandon had been sleeping with Vanessa Carlisle, the daughter of a major real estate investor in Pittsburgh. Vanessa had money, connections, and a direct path into the world Brandon had always wanted. The night before the wedding, she gave him an ultimatum. Marry Marina and lose everything with her, or call it off, and her father would bring him into a new investment fund. Brandon chose Vanessa, chose money, chose status, chose a shinier door. And instead of having the courage to tell Marina face to face, he sent 3 words. I can't. Marina went very still when she heard the full story. Not because she still loved him, but because she finally understood she had been weighed like a bad investment. She asked quietly, So you left me at the altar because I wasn't valuable enough for your future? Brandon frowned. I didn't say that. Marina looked him straight in the eye. No, you said exactly that. You just used more than 3 words this time. Brandon didn't give up. He took the story to social media. He claimed I had taken advantage of Marina when she was vulnerable, that our marriage was fake, that she was only with me to get revenge on him. A few people from his side joined in, digging up old videos and turning the wedding day into gossip all over again. Marina was shaken. She tried to act strong, but I saw her reading comments late into the night. I saw her sitting in the dark living room. I saw her take her ring off, stare at it, and put it back on like she wasn't sure she had the right to wear it anymore. One night I found her sitting on the back steps of our building, wearing only a thin jacket, arms wrapped around her knees. Am I dragging you into too much trouble? She asked. I sat down beside her. No. You could have had a quieter life if you hadn't stood up that day. I looked at her. I already had a quiet life before that day. And it was peaceful, but it didn't have you in it. She started crying. I took her hand. Listen to me. Brandon left you at that altar, but he doesn't get to decide the rest of your life. Neither do the people online. Neither does his family. Not even I do. Only you get to decide where you want to be. What if I choose you? Then I'll choose you back every single day. Not because of that day in the church, not because of pity, because of you. Marina leaned against my shoulder. This time, she didn't try to be strong. The next morning, she posted a public statement. It wasn't long, it wasn't dramatic. She wrote that the first wedding had started in chaos, but her marriage was no longer a reaction to being abandoned. It had become a choice. She thanked people for their concern but made it clear she didn't need to be rescued from Dean. The last line was simple. The person who left me doesn't define me. The person who stayed doesn't own me either. I choose this love because it respects me. The post spread quickly. Some people supported her. Some still judged. But this time Marina didn't delete anything. She didn't hide. She didn't cry from shame. She stood beside me at the coffee shop the next morning with her ring on and her head high. Brandon made a few more attempts, then disappeared from our story. We kept living. Not perfectly, but honestly. We moved into an even better apartment with a real studio space for Marina's design work. She began transitioning fully into interior design at the firm. I enrolled in evening classes for project management certification. Not because I needed to prove I was good enough for her, but because for the first time, I wanted to build something solid for both of us. One quiet evening while we were eating noodles in the kitchen, Marina looked at me and said, "I love you." I dropped my fork. She laughed through tears. "Not because you saved me at the church. Not because I'm grateful. I love you because you make tea without asking. Because you read my sketches like they matter. Because you never make me feel like I owe you anything when you love me." I stood up, walked around the table, and pulled her into my arms. "I love you too," I said. "I think I've been in love with you since before I knew I was allowed to be." That night we stopped being two people living together because of a chaotic day. We became husband and wife for real. A year after that first chaotic day at the church, Marina looked at me over breakfast and said, "I want to marry you again." I was rinsing a mug at the sink. My hand stopped moving. "We're already married." "I know. But the first time was about surviving a terrible day. This time, I want to marry you because I choose you. Not in front of people who are laughing at me, in front of the people who actually love us." I turned to face her. "Are you proposing to me?" She shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "Maybe." "Then I accept." The second wedding was nothing like the first. Only about 40 people gathered in her parents' backyard on a warm Saturday afternoon. Her mother had grown white roses again, but this time she wasn't crying from pain. She was crying from relief. George walked Marina down the short aisle between rows of folding chairs and placed her hand in mine. "Last time you stood up for my girl," he said quietly. "This time, stay for her." "I plan to," I answered. Marina wore a simple white dress, lighter, softer, the kind she said she could actually breathe in. I wore the same gray suit from the first wedding, now taken in at the shoulders. I was still just Dean Miller, still the guy who checked technical drawings for a living, still driving the same old Ford with the loan I hadn't finished paying off. But when Marina walked toward me, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. Our vows were different this time. I spoke first. "The first time I made promises to you, I barely knew what I was doing. I only knew you didn't deserve to be left standing alone. Today I know exactly what I'm doing. I choose you, not out of pity, not out of honor, not because of one impulsive moment. I choose you because you're the person who made an ordinary man like me believe that kindness can still build a beautiful life." Marina's eyes filled with tears. "The first time I said yes to you, it was because I needed an escape. Today I say yes because I found home. You didn't save me by making me feel weak. You saved me by reminding me I deserve to be respected. I love you because you didn't just stand up once in that church. You stayed every single day after." We kissed under strings of warm lights while her family clapped. Real applause this time, no confusion, no pity. 2 years later, Marina became the lead interior designer at Whitmore Design Group. People started saying her spaces felt like home. I still worked in technical documentation, but after hours I studied for my project management certification. Not to prove I was good enough for her, just because I finally wanted to build something solid for the three of us. Marina got pregnant in the fall of our third year together. When she showed me the test, her hands were shaking. I looked at the two pink lines and couldn't speak. I just pulled her into my arms and cried like a kid. We named our daughter Hope. Because Marina said, "That's what I found again on the day I thought I'd lost everything." 5 years after the day Brandon sent those 3 words, I brought Hope to pick Marina up from work. Our little girl ran across the lobby yelling, "Mommy!" at the top of her lungs. Marina scooped her up, kissed her cheek, and laughed that full, bright laugh I'd fallen in love with. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered. I watched her expression change, calm, distant. When she hung up, I asked, "Who was that?" She looked at me, then at Hope playing with her hair. "Brandon." I stayed quiet. "He said he's sorry," she continued. "Said he finally understands what he did." "Are you okay?" Marina smiled. "Yeah, I forgave him." I was surprised. "Not because he deserves it," she said. watching Hope point at a bird outside, because I deserve peace. And honestly, if he hadn't left me at that altar, I never would have found you. I took her hand. I don't know whether to thank him or still hate him. She laughed. Just order pizza tonight, that's enough. That evening we went home. Hope demanded to watch the same cartoon for the 100th time. Marina curled against my side on the couch while our daughter lay between us, clutching her stuffed bear, eyes glued to the screen. I looked around our small house. Nothing fancy, nothing impressive, nothing like the big dreams other people had once told me I should chase. But it had Marina. It had hope. It had laughter in the kitchen. It had chamomile tea on rainy nights. It had a woman who held my hand like I had never been anyone's second choice. I thought about that day in the church. If I could go back, I would still stand up. I would still walk past all those laughing faces. I would still look at that shaking bride and say, I will marry her. Because sometimes a whole life doesn't change because of a perfect plan. Sometimes it changes because in someone else's worst moment, you choose to stand. And if you're brave enough to stay afterward, one act of kindness can become an entire family.